The politicization of COVID-19 is the most extreme of any health problem that there are certain things Pixar fans are known to do. Anthony Fauci has experienced in his career, the infectious disease expert revealed in his latest review of the coronavirus pandemic. The battle against the disease has taken on a political tone like nothing I've ever seen, Fauci said in an interview Thursday arranged by National Geographic magazine. And it's not helping, he noted. We certainly are not where I hoped we would be, Fauci said. The animosity and pushback he experienced while battling HIV and AIDS were never anything as serious as it is now, when he and his family have been threatened with death as he works to protect public health, Fauci explained. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases appeared to still be stunned by the vicious reaction, and at a loss to explain it. They love to hunt down the company's Easter eggs, like A113 and the Pizza Planet truck. They frequently weep at children's films. And they compulsively rank all of the studio's movies, of which there are 22 and counting with the release of the animation giant's latest effort, Onward. In honor of Onward, try saying that 5 times fast. This Pixar fan humbly presents his deeply personal and yet, somehow, 100% objectively correct ranking of those 22 movies. Fauci attributed it to an extreme, disturbing divisiveness in the nation. It seems inconceivable, he told interviewer Deborah Roberts of ABC News. Compared with some of the other franchises, universes, or genres of Ranked, this was an absolute pleasure. Okay, maybe not an absolute pleasure, there was still the small matter of Cars 2. Still, it could be, and has been, so much worse. Without further ado, here's every Pixar film ranked from worst to best. 22. Take a deep breath and think about it. When you're trying to promote public health principles to save people's lives, that there's such divisiveness in the country that it's interpreted to be so far from your own way of thinking that you actually want to threaten the person. He added, "It's tough for me to figure that out except to say, boy, I hope we get past this divisiveness in our country. There's just no way that our society can really function well and go along that way." The Good Dinosaur 2015. Several Pixar films have undergone major revisions during the writing process, but The Good Dinosaur is really the only one that feels like a bunch of different movies stitched together. Pixar famously spent years developing one version of the film, then scrapped most of their work and went back to the drawing board with an almost entirely new cast. The finished product pairs some of the most stunning and realistic nature animation that's ever been made with extremely cartoonish dinosaurs, a combination that is as bizarre as it is incongruous. The almost photographic backgrounds certainly work for a story about the dangers and beauty of the wilderness, but it's still an odd fit for a western about a knobby-kneed dinosaur and his cuddly, dog-like human buddy. It's also an odd fit for this surprisingly bleak movie about death, grief, and anger. The Good Dinosaur is not only the worst Pixar, it's also the strangest. We've got to get past that. Fauci said it would be helpful if people would think about health and safety measures not as blocking a return to more normal times but as gateways to getting there, one thoughtful, careful step at a time. He also seemed to take subtle shots at Donald Trump, who has refused to recommend or mandate national guidelines, such as wearing a mask, to help stem the spread of COVID-19, and the president's dismissive responses to the death toll. You can't run away from the numbers of people who've died, the number of people who are getting hospitalized, the surges we're seeing, Fauci said. And in a world where Cars 2 exists, that's really saying something. 21. Improving the future is going to depend on us, he added. Fauci characterized the U.S. approach to dealing with COVID-19 as scattershot and disappointing. Bottom line is, I'm not pleased with how things are going, he told Roberts. We did not have a universal strategy in the sense of everybody pulling in the same direction, of the kinds of things that can contain and slow down an outbreak. Distancing, masks, avoiding crowds, outdoors better than indoors, washing hands, doing things like closing bars, where appropriate, because that seems to be a hot spot of transmission, he explained. Cars 2 2011 Cars 2 is just your run-of-the-mill kids movie about sentient automobiles existing on a planet exactly like our own except for its total lack of human life, engaged in international espionage and encountering car toilets and car bidets and car food and car sleeping gas. Sleeping gas? So the cars are breathing somehow. Where are their lungs? The spy plot involving the dim-witted truck modder Larry the Cable Guy is truly bizarre, but it at least offers a lot of opportunities to ponder these genuinely perplexing aspects of the Cars-iverse. In addition to breathing, the cars eat food as well, which raises numerous questions not only about how they digest the food but where the food comes from as well. 20 areas began relaunching economic activity too soon when case numbers were still very high, and even surging, he noted. Leaders need to use their heads about reopening schools, Fauci cautioned. Monsters University 2013, raunchy college comedy sits somewhat uncomfortably with standard Pixar buddy antics in this Monsters Inc. In-person instruction may be possible in green zone communities where infection rates are very low. Prequel. Years before their work scaring children, Mike, Billy Crystal, and Sully, John Goodman, meet and become rivals, and later best buds, as the members of a Revenge of the Nerds-esque fraternity of outsiders. While the animation and voice work are up to Pixar's typically excellent standards, Monsters University is about as forgettable a film as the studio has produced, and nowhere near the level of the original Monsters movie. For all the jagged edges of the monstrous production design, where everything from picture frames to porticos are rimmed in toothy ridges, the film could have used a little more bite. 19. But in red zones, where cases are surging, local leaders and parents should carefully consider whether they want to put kids back in school under those circumstances. Fauci also expressed skepticism about a purported COVID-19 vaccine from Russia. Brave 2012, Pixar's first princess movie barely holds a candle to their usual output. Even their unparalleled character design and animation look a little drab this time out. Having a vaccine, and proving that a vaccine is safe and effective are two different things, he said. Once a successful vaccine is proved to be safe for use in the U.S., Fauci said, he would gladly accept one that is 50% to 75% effective. But people couldn't then throw caution to the wind. Such a vaccination would be a very important additional tool to public health measures. Check out Fauci's interview in the video above or in this transcript. A HuffPost guide to coronavirus. Stay up to date with our live blog as we cover the COVID-19 pandemic. What you need to know about face masks right now. How long are asymptomatic carriers contagious? Lost your job due to coronavirus? Here's what you need to know. How to switch off from work when home is your office. 8 sleep tips if coronavirus anxiety is keeping you up at night. How long does coronavirus live in the air? What coronavirus questions are on your mind right now? We want to help you find answers. Everyone deserves accurate information about COVID-19. Kelly McDonald plays the fiery Princess Merida, who rejects her parents' attempts to arrange a marriage to a suitable man by turning her mother, Emma Thompson, into a bear. Support journalism without a paywall, and keep it free for everyone, by becoming a HuffPost member today. This article originally appeared on HuffPost. More from HuffPost US. Here's how long you're protected from COVID-19 after recovery. Georgia's Stone Mountain Park shutting down ahead of militia rally. Here's how being polyamorous prepared me for parenting. The way the conflict between mother and daughter resolves is as magical as that grisly transformation. Pretty much one montage catching fish seems to fix a lifetime of resentments and frustration, and generally everything about the third act seems very simple and easy, a far cry from Pixar's typically Rube Goldbergian climaxes. Brave is sweet, slight, and not particularly courageous. 18. Cars 2006. Before its reputation was besmirched by its inferior sequel, Cars was an unassuming tribute to Route 66 and small-town America, couched in a tot-friendly tale of a cocky race car learning a lesson about the value of slowing down to smell the proverbial roses, although there are no roses in Cars land, because there's basically no crops, or organic life of any kind, so in this case you'd probably stop and smell, I dunno, the white rose motor oil or something. The original Cars also has one of Pixar's strongest voice casts, including Owen Wilson, Bonnie Hunt, Tony Shalhoub, George Carlin, Cheech Marin, Michael Keaton, and the late Paul Newman as Doc Hudson. Are you ready for the hottest take on this list? Larry the Cable Guy's motto is kind of funny. 17. Finding Dory 2016. Pixar has made some risky sequels through the years. Finding Dory is not one of them. Instead, it's a pleasant, beat-for-beat rehash of the original Finding Nemo, with Ellen DeGeneres' forgetful Dory going missing instead of neurotic Marlin's, Albert Brooks' son. There are some delightful highlights, every Pixar movie has them, and Ed O'Neill's cantankerous, Septipus, Hank, he's short one limb, part of the film's recurring motif of highly capable heroes with physical disabilities, steals scene after scene with his inventive disguises and dexterity. Still, it's hard to argue this isn't lesser Pixar. We'll know the studio's in real trouble when they announce Finding Marlin. 16. Cars 3 2017. For my money, Cars 3 is the best of the Cars films. The series started as one of Pixar's least adult-friendly. Its colorful automotive characters and their simple journeys were adored by children and largely ignored by their parents. But Cars 3 added a surprising wistfulness and maturity to the mix, as its hero, Lightning McQueen, Owen Wilson, grapples with the realization that he is nearing the end of his racing career. Director Brian Fee's messages about self-acceptance and tolerance don't always make sense in the context of a universe where cars have become sentient and wiped out the human race. But like most of the best Pixar movies, Cars 3 is a touching road movie about the power of friendship. 15. Toy Story 4 2019. The darkness creeping at the edges of the Toy Story franchise moves closer to its center in this fourth film, which starts with a suicidal toy and only gets bleaker from there. Toy Story 3 was already the perfect ending for these characters, although it's nice to spend some more time with Woody, Tom Hanks, Buzz, Tim Allen, and a heroic Bo Peep, Annie Potts. Still, the herky-jerky narrative does feel a little less organic and satisfying than the others in this franchise, at least until the finale cues the de rigueur waterworks. 14. Incredibles 2 2018, released 14 years after the first Incredibles, into a movie-going landscape where superheroes are the norm instead of the exception. Brad Bird basically embraced the notion from the original movie about how when everyone is super, no one is. Incredibles 2 is less about the par's superhero exploits than about their mundane struggle to keep their family together. With Elastigirl Holly Hunter accepting a new job, Mr. Incredible Craig T. Nelson becomes a stay-at-home father, and discovers powers are worthless when dealing with a real supervillain, an overactive baby. Both moms and dads will likely take a lot out of the message that parenthood is the real never-ending battle, and one always worth fighting. 13. Onward 2020. After 25 years of movies, Pixar's breathtaking innovations are starting to feel more like a formula they've found endless ways to recycle. Onward is yet another road trip comedy about two mismatched partners working through heavy emotional issues, in this case brothers Ian Tom Holland and Barley Chris Pratt, who are trying to find a magic stone that will resurrect their late father for a single day. Regardless, while Pixar's movies might not feel as fresh as they once did, all those years honing the studio's craft and learning from their mistakes have produced an extremely talented team of filmmakers who can take some familiar tropes and spin them into something genuinely moving like this. 12. A Bug's Life 1998. Pixar never even approached a sophomore slump. Their follow-up to the original Toy Story was this extremely entertaining bug-centric reimagining of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Only the samurai are circus bugs desperate for a job, and they're recruited by a bumbling ant inventor, Dave Foley, who's got a great voice and laugh for animation. Though the visuals are crude by today's standards, particularly in the natural landscapes of Ant Island, which are desperately lacking in detail, the studio was already well on its way to honing its signature brand of comic adventure loaded with heartfelt emotions. Plus, the Randy Newman score slaps. 11. Coco 2017, just your average kids movie about death, murder, loss, grief, dementia, living skeletons, and deadbeat dads. Even by the standards of Pixar, a studio that almost exclusively makes movies for adults couched in the trappings of children's entertainment, Coco is a mature film, which tackles subjects like mortality and loss head-on. It's also one of the studio's most imaginatively designed efforts, particularly in its gorgeously colorful Land of the Dead. One gripe, its key song, Remember Me, was slightly redundant. Anyone who sobbed their way through this film's climax needs no coaxing to remember it. 10. Toy Story 3 2010, nobody escapes from that emotionally pummeling finale with dry eyes. And there's definitely something to be said for the way Pixar has never flinched from the reality it established with the first Toy Story. Life for a toy is basically a ceaseless existence of misery punctuated by fleeting moments of pure joy. Life for a toy, you see, is exactly the same as life for a human. Still, Toy Story 3 doesn't quite recapture the heights of either for the first two movies, and it does recycle a lot of the emotional beats of the second film. Like a beat-up toy with a fresh set of batteries, it still works, but it's not quite as thrilling as it used to be. 9. Ratatouille 2007. When I watched Ratatouille in the past, I would get hung up on the mechanics of how Remy the rat, Patton Oswalt, controls Linguini, Lou Romano. Is Linguini a mutant? Could you control anyone if you tugged on the right strands of hairs in the right ways? This bugged me for years. Then I revisited the film with my daughter and I realized it just doesn't matter. If you buy the notion that a rat can not only cook food but understand English as well, it's really not that far of a stretch to imagine controlling a hapless busboy by tugging on his hair. And with that set aside, Ratatouille is one of Pixar's most emotional tributes to unconventional artists and the magic they can create when allowed to do what they love. 8. Toy Story 1995. The film that started it all for Pixar is no longer the visual marvel it was in 1995. In fact, when watched in direct proximity with Toy Story 4, it's astonishing to see how far digital animation has progressed. You still can't go wrong with the early days of Woody and Buzz, or with Randy Newman's iconic music, or the genuinely creepy sequences involving the mean neighbor Sid's Frankenstein Y toy creations. 7. Monsters, Inc. 2001. Monsters, Inc. is the most underrated of all the Pixar films, the classic that tends to get forgotten in discussions of the best Pixar movies. It has some of the studio's most imaginative character designs, one of its cleverest and most logically consistent alternate worlds, and an ending that is both thrilling, the Doors chase, and emotionally satisfying. Kitty. Maybe its so-so sequel has unfairly tarnished its memory. But the original Monsters, Inc. is up there with the best of Pixar. 6. The Incredibles 2004. 6 years later, Brad Bird's Pixar debut holds up beautifully. Its story about a family of superheroes hiding their powers became controversial because of a message about the dangers of a world where everyone is super, and thus no one is. Some viewers seem to miss, though, that the character espousing that worldview is its villain. And when its hero laments the way his children are stifled and barred from using their gifts, he is actually projecting his own insecurities and frustrations onto them in the midst of a surprisingly honest portrait of a Superman in the midst of a midlife crisis. 5. WALL-E 2008. When people pine for the glory days of Pixar, or talk about the studio's reputation for taking risks, they're talking about WALL-E, which opens with a nearly wordless 30-minute stretch that blends bleak dystopian science fiction with Chaplin-esque physical comedy and zero human characters. Instead, director Andrew Stanton focuses on a quirky little robot named WALL-E, who lives alone in the ruined wasteland of Earth compacting trash because that is what he was programmed to do hundreds of years earlier. The story gets a bit more familiar once WALL-E winds up on a spaceship filled with the last vestiges of humanity, but we shouldn't discount the fact that even at its most formulaic, the film is a ruthless satire of our society's compulsive and deeply unhealthy obsession with screens like the one you're reading these words on right now. 4. Toy Story 2 1999. These days, Pixar churns out so many marginal sequels it's easy to forget that once upon a time they made one of the greatest sequels in film history. Everyone loves Up's heartbreaking opening sequence, but the scene that reveals Jesse's tragic backstory in Toy Story 2 might be even more devastating. Either way, this was certainly a pivotal moment in the early days of the company, when they reworked what was originally conceived as a direct-to-video sequel and instead made a worthy big-screen follow-up that also marked Pixar's first real foray into this level of gut-wrenching drama. 3. Up 2009. Everyone loves Up's devastating opening montage, which chronicles decades of highs and soul-crushing lows in a happy couple's marriage in a matter of minutes. But they underrate the rest of the film that follows, where crotchety widower Carl Fredricksen, Ed Asner, makes good on a promise to his late wife Ellie by flying his house down to South America. There he makes friends with a kooky bird, a talking dog named Doug and a young scout named Russell Jordan Nagai, who stowed away on the journey. It's full of wonderful humor, warmth, and whimsy. And here's a fun game to play: try not to burst into tears when Michael Giacchino's music starts playing over the opening credits. 2. Finding Nemo 2003. Even if Finding Nemo isn't the best Pixar film, it might be the Pixar IEST.
It's got two mismatched buddies on a road trip. Can you go on a road trip underwater? It's got amazing supporting characters. The fish in the dentist's tank could sustain their own movie and they're just one small part of this one. It's got a wildly suspenseful finale, and it's got the overwhelming pathos of a single father's quest to save his son. 1. Inside Out 2015. Before he was Pixar's chief creative officer, Pete Docter was already the company's resident genius. He was a writer on Toy Story, Toy Story 2, and WALL-E, and the director of 3 of the studio's best films, Monsters, Inc., Up, and Inside Out, a brilliantly conceived story about the inner life of an 11-year-old girl. When Riley and her family relocate from Minnesota to San Francisco, her whole world is thrown into chaos, which prompts a battle between her brain's anthropomorphized emotions. The design of Riley's brainscape is endlessly inventive. There's something interesting to look at in every single shot of every single scene. More importantly, Inside Out is one of the wisest films ever made about the importance of sadness and grief in one's life. It's the crowning achievement of Doctor's incredible career, at least until Soul comes out. As Amazon associates, we earn on qualifying purchases. Gallery, amazing Pixar Easter eggs.